We're now joined by Julie Armstrong, who is the Executive Director of the Illinois Nutrient Research and Education Council, where she works with the council to direct funds from the fertilizer assessment into projects and priorities that support nutrient research and outreach. Good morning to you, Julie. Thank you for being with us today.
Good morning. Thank you so much. It's a privilege and an honor to be able to join this group and to be able to share the latest on what is happening with Illinois NREC. So most of you that are on the call are familiar with NREC, so I won't spend a lot of time, kind of going over our mission and how things are funded. We'll touch on that as we go through. But really today I want to focus on what this first screen says, which is really the goal of NREC, and this is where our resources and our energy are focused, and that's on being able to take peer-reviewed science, take it from, some of our projects a lot of them start with literature reviews. They go sometimes then directly to a lab, and then go into maybe sometimes greenhouses, small plots, and then finally to full farm or full field research, which then we hope can be adopted as on-farm practices. And so we really concentrate on taking that science from concept all the way through adoption on the farm. So to that end, we really focus on proposals that fit into these three categories, which would be improved nutrient efficiency, enhanced crop production, and protecting water quality. And I think that's one of the things that's important as we think about the role that production ag plays and the role that the research that's being funded through NREC plays, is that we really focus on making sure that it's hitting on all three of those points. We want to improve the efficiency. We want to enhance the production while also protecting the water quality. And, it's a win-win for everybody all along the chain. The more efficient we are with our nutrient usage, the better our crop is. So therefore, that's a revenue stream, obviously, for our farmers. And then the more of the nutrients that are going to support a growing crop, and again, that sort of high-end crop production, that's less of those nutrients that are ending up in our water supply. So we, again, really focus on those three areas. We are made up of a council of 13 folks who are, ultimately appointed by the Illinois Director of Ag. But those nominations come from organizations across the state. So we have farm organizations, farmer producer organizations. We have the Illinois Fertilizer and Chemical Association group. We have certified crop advisors. We have our agency folks, so Illinois Department of Ag and Illinois EPA, and then also our environmental partners. So as we make the decisions about what types of projects are going to be funded, we rely on that council, and those folks are interacting with their respective organizations. So, we get input from all of those groups. And then on top of that, we also have a research committee that is made up of most of the council plus 5 farmers that represent the different geographies across the state. Because again, if you think about our goal being that we have practices that can be adopted on farm, we sometimes need to have that gut check that says, okay, this sounds good, but does this fit the growing conditions in different parts of the state? Does it fit it all with typical agronomic practices, and what would be the impact of that? And then the other really important part of this process is we utilize an independent peer review team. And so that is coordinated by Dr. Shani Galabai, who is our research manager. And she works with experts from both academia and from industry to make sure that the proposals that come in are scientifically sound, that the methodology makes sense, that the budgets kind of make sense, and ultimately, the other thing is to make sure it's not research that's already been done and that we already have answers to, but then also, really evaluating if it could make an impact in the practices we have. And then we review all of those projects. We rank them based on their merit and the availability of funds. And so we have been around, we've been around. 2012 was actually the founding. 2013 was our first year of funding. And since that time, we have invested over $26 million in research projects. And I'll go through just a little bit of what some of those things have been and kind of the information that is coming out of that. So we have created 4 different kind of standalone publications. The first was a turf guide, and working close with our specialty fertilizer folks there. We have had 2 versions of a cover crop guide, and that was done in a partnership with Illinois Fertilizer and Chemical Association, and then pulling together a lot of the research that's been funded across several different universities. We also had a guide to the MRTN, so the maximum return to nitrogen, and the NREC calculator. And again, that was done in partnership with IFCA and with the work done by Dr. Emerson Knopfsinger. We also put out, annual reports, investment insights, field notes. We've really started to ramp up the use of videos, particularly, under our current restrictions of not really being able to be together in person. We know we all like to learn in different ways, and for a lot of folks, being able to watch a video has been really helpful. We also last year had a very successful research forum, and that was where we brought together a lot of our stakeholders. And so a lot of folks that are on this call, you were able to participate in that. We brought together our researchers, and not just the primary investigators or the faculty that are working on the projects, but also the students at a lot of different levels. So, the PhD students, the grad students, and even some of the undergrad folks that are working in the lab. And one of the biggest things we saw come out of that was the ability to share information, even at University of Illinois, for folks to be able to talk across departments about what they're working on, and then to connect folks across the different universities that are doing work on NREC projects. If you go back to that first kind of opening slide, talking about peer-reviewed science and making sure that we are working with the most recent, the most accurate science, one of our goals is to have projects that will lead to being published in professional journals. And so to date, we have nearly 24 papers that have been published. A lot of those are, there's like even more that are in review, and we anticipate seeing soon. And then also, many opportunities for collaboration on research and outreach projects. And we really do appreciate those partnerships and the ability to get things out and share with the farming and ag retail community. So when we talk about the NREC publications, we have added this section to our website. And I think one of the U of I folks is going to put this link in the chat box. We did just add this. We're doing some background work on our website right now. When we created our new website, there were some things that got lost in the transition. So we're currently working on getting that updated and also making this page easier to search. But this is a current list with links to NREC funded research that has been published in peer-reviewed journals. So it's a good resource to have there. So now I'm going to shift gears a little bit and just talk specifically about 2021 and the research priorities that were identified, and then kind of where our funding is and the focus that we're going to have here over the next year or so. So we divide our projects in 3 or 4 different categories. The first would be really looking at sort of the 4 R's, just nutrient efficiency on the front end. So making sure that we're being as efficient as possible with those applications. So looking at, the source, the place, the rate, and the time of those applications. And, of course, this time of year, we also do try to support some of the outreach around following proper BMPs, around watching our soil temperatures, using an inhibitor, those types of things. And again, that's all supported with science that has been done through this research that is telling us that this is our potential for loss is greater when we're not following those BMPs. The next category really comes in knowing that it's hard to be 100% efficient on the front end. We're doing the best we can, and I think we're really tightening that up. But we know that there is the potential for some excess nutrients to come out of production ag. And so we look at cover crops and the opportunity to use those cover crops to capture any excess nutrients that may be left after a production year. And so, looking at things like all of the different aspects, from an agronomic standpoint, how to best establish, how to terminate, how to manage pests, looking at grazing through, crop termination, and then also looking at what other options are there. We've done a lot of work working on cereal rye, but knowing that there may be other options, there's mixes, some of those things out there. So those are some of the things we were asking for. I'm also looking at reduced tillage or strip till, some of the erosion control, looking at ways that we can use that to manage phosphorus loss. Also looking at just phosphorus kind of as its own beast a little bit. Looking at the role of legacy phosphorus, looking at placement and timing, and then also understanding that wheat is an important part, or that phosphorus is an important part of the wheat production, and making sure that we're not ignoring that important crop here in the state. This year specifically, if we think back to a year ago when we were all together and talking about the latest biennial report and some of the increased nutrient loads in the Illinois and Rock River watersheds, we had asked for some specific work to be done on looking at if we could identify some of the underlying issues for that. And then finally, we really, are interested in getting projects that go beyond the known. We obviously have a lot of the practices are outlined in the strategy, and we want to continue to research those and support those. But we also want to look at, getting a better understanding of what could be next and what are some of the things that we could embrace as we go forward. So this year we have invested just shy of $4 million in research projects. We have 33 projects, with 24 of those being ongoing projects and 9 being new. And University of Illinois, SIU at Carbondale, Purdue, and the Purdue work is done by Dr. Shalimar Armstrong. So it's actually all done in Illinois, primarily in McLean County. But that is obviously with Shalimar being in Purdue, that's where the funding goes, and then subawards back to Illinois State. This year, we actually are really excited to have a project with Western Illinois University and a livestock grazing project. So we're excited to kind of bring them into the NREC fold. And then, of course, we have a long-time relationship and partnership with IFCA and a lot of the work that Dan Schaefer does to support research projects and also a lot of the outreach that happens. So again, I'm going to kind of go back to those buckets that we talked about and talk specific around those things. So we'll talk a little bit about 4Rs. A lot of the work that goes into that is ongoing NREC trials to support MRTN and the NREC calculator. And so again, that's a lot of work that was done with Dr. Knopfsinger, and then also has continued to be supported by IFCA. We also look at the impact of timing on tile nitrate levels. In the last year and a half or so, there's been a lot of attention given to the role of mineralization, particularly as we looked at nitrates following soybeans, and that's some work that's being done by Lowell Gentry, and also looking at nitrate losses from the zero nitrogen trials. So looking at, I think from a production ag standpoint, we have all felt comfortable knowing that the nitrate levels are not just a response to over fertilization. We know that farmers and our ag retailers are responsible with applying those, but seeing that role of mineralization has helped to put some science behind some of those assumptions. We're also looking at precision ag for nitrogen management. And again, that's some work being done by Dr. Sajapur out of Carbondale. looking at placement, making sure that we're putting the nutrients where they're most available for uptake. And then also looking at stable isotopes. So this is some work being done by Dr. Fred Below to understand sources and cycling of nitrates. So that's a new project that is just getting started. And so we are excited to see where that goes. Of course, then we go into cover crops, and we know that there's been a lot of work and a lot of attention given to cover crops. And if you look at the strategy and look at the percentage of reduction that is assigned to cover crops, it makes sense why that has been a focus of our attention and kind of everybody's attention. But in the cover crop arena, we have a long-term paired watershed research project. And again, that's what Dr. Shalimar Armstrong and his team have been working on. That's taking place in the Lake Bloomington watershed. And it's been a great opportunity to look at the both a cover cropped and non-cover cropped watershed. And that project is sort of evolving and going into its next phases as we go into 2021 and 2022. With that and several of the other projects, also looking at the end application timing and the cover crops, and then how does that impact the fate and the availability of N fertilizer. So this is particularly using the N15 to track how that's going through. Looking at some extended rotation with cover crops. So again, this is some of the work being done by Lowell Gentry and incorporating wheat into a rotation to see if an extended rotation can help us manage some of those tile nitrates. We had a shorter term project, but a good project that's ongoing, looking at insect management, because again, we want to make sure that we are providing agronomic answers as well as tile, or as well as nutrient management issues with cover crops. Also looking at utilizing cover crops in the southern part of the state, and that would be also for phosphorus as well as nitrates. And then we've had two big modeling projects that we're excited about. The one is with Jonathan Kappas, and so that is actually available on FarmDoc. I should have sent that link as well, but I'll put that in the chat after we wrap up with this. But it is available on FarmDoc, and it's kind of a calculator to help evaluate cover crop usage. The other one is a large project being done by Dr. Caillou Guan, and that is still in the development stages, but we are excited to get that launched, and I think some of you will get an opportunity to see that fairly soon. And then, as I mentioned before, we are looking at integrating cover crops into grazing cover crops into the system. So again, looking at a whole system approach, and we're excited to partner with Western Illinois University on that. Phosphorus research, a couple of great things we're seeing here. That would be some of the struvite work that is being done by Dr. Andrew Margonaut. And again, this is a great example of something that started in the lab, went to a greenhouse, went to a small plot, and now, thanks to our partners at Illinois Farm Bureau helping us identify farmers that can do this in whole field situations. So Andrew is working up in LaSalle County to look at this at a whole field situation. Also looking at edge of field phosphorus filters, the freeze and thaw cycle impact on phosphorus loss, looking at designer biochar to help remove phosphorus coming through. Again, another project being done by Andrew Margonaut, and that's the role of legacy phosphorus. You may have seen on some of our social media, Andrew actually had the opportunity to go through a warehouse before it was torn down there on campus, and found about 150 years worth of soil samples. So those will be used to look at legacy phosphorus and really help categorize and catalog the soils across the state. The other thing would be now on wasp cobs. In probably the lower third part of the state, water and sediment control basins are a fairly common structure, but there hasn't been a ton of work done on what the removal rates are for those. So we have two projects that are working on that. And I know that Shani Galavai, our research manager, and Austin at Illinois Farm Bureau are working on looking through all of the existing data to make sure we can get a good understanding of what the removal potential is with those structures. And then finally, looking at gypsum, particularly in the southern part of the state, and how that could potentially play a role in managing our phosphorus losses. Edge of field practices, we can't talk about the nutrient loss reduction strategy without talking about edge of field practices. And wood chip bioreactors got a good call out at the beginning of our meeting. And of course, you know, we are excited about the work that has been done across the state with those. Dr. Laura Christensen and also Dr. Cook have really been the leading researchers looking at those practices. We've also looked at constructed wetlands, looking at drainage water management, and then also the saturated buffers. So we actually have one of the projects that's being done by the folks at Carbondale that's looking at a new design for saturated buffers, which is the pitchfork design. And again, that has been installed on a farmer's field, and we're in the process of collecting that data. And we're also really excited that we had the opportunity to be a matching funds partner on a large SIG grant that Laura Christensen and her team and some surrounding state partners were able to be awarded. And so that's looking at the wood chip bioreactors and saturated buffers. And I think it's a great opportunity that we can take, you know, farmer dollars that are collected through our retailers and help to leverage them to get even more research done on these important practices in Illinois. And we're excited for Laura and her team to see where that goes. And just quickly to touch on some of these emerging issues, one of the things that we have been working on for several years that's being led by Dr. Angela Kent and her lab is DNRA, so the dissimilatory nitrate reduction to ammonium. I always have to practice that to make sure I say it the right way. But, you know, again, this was really something that started at a small scale and now has been taken to field level. And we're excited to see, you know, how that will play out. And that has also led to the last thing on that list, which is looking at the corn microbiome and how, you know, corn can fix its own nitrogen. It can, you know, be better, more efficient on utilizing it, and kind of taking our things we think we know about how a corn plant utilizes nitrogen and setting it on end a little bit. So we're excited to see where that goes. Also have a project by Rabin Batari about tile depth and spacing, and having a better understanding of how that impacts nutrient flow and nutrient loss. And of course, we know that tile plays a huge part in our production ag systems. And so wanting to have a better idea about how we can be more thoughtful and better manage nutrient loss as we look at that depth and spacing. And then, as I said before, that the white paper research that's related to the phosphorus loading in Illinois and Rock River. So we're excited about those two things. And I know I went through that really fast, but I also know that we're up against lunch. And unless you're like me, when you're at home and you just snack the whole time, my poor kids are going to have no Halloween candy by the time they get home, because I'm slowly making my way through it. I think we're down to just like Smarties left. All the chocolate's gone. But you can get more information. I really would encourage you to visit our website. As I said, we are in the process of updating and reloading some of the stuff that didn't make the transfer to the new site, but that should be done here in the next week or so. We're also on Twitter, on Facebook. You can email me, or you can always reach out to Dr. Golovai as well if you have any questions.
So there are a couple of quick questions, Julie, before we get to lunch. How does the RFP funding happen?
Okay, so that's a great question. We actually have already started the process as we look towards 2022 projects. So we will start developing those priorities at a meeting later this month. And then sort of through the winter, Shani will be working to identify what those priorities will be. We will send out an RFP in the spring with those proposals being due back, you know, I think June is when the due date is, and then they'll get reviewed, and then funding decisions are made over the summer. Now we have moved that. It used to be that we made those decisions in December, but we have moved that to a summer time frame to better align with the crop year.
Is your funded research looking at the reduced nutrient application needed as farmers increase their soil organic matter?
I don't know, and Shani, if she's on, she can jump on and answer that more specifically. But I don't know that we have anything specifically looking at soil organic matter, but definitely, as we look at cover crops particularly and what's available there, we are looking at the rate and if we can reduce nutrients based on that.
Julie, thank you so much. We appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you.